custom and social etiquette in everyday life in America. 1. Introduction. America, also known as the United States, is one of the most diverse and distinctive countries in the world in terms of culture. It is home to many communities with different backgrounds coming from various continents and bringing them their own custom, language, belief, and ways of life. This cultural interaction has created a rich, dynamic, and colorful society where the rule of behaviors in daily life represent and reflect both modern values and the unique cultural identity of the American people. When exploring life in America, we do not only see strong development in the fields of economy, education, and technology, but also realize that the way people treat one another in everyday situations is an important part of what shapes the identity of this country. One of the most notable features of American culture is its strong emphasis on individual freedom. People in Africa are often encouraged to live independently, express their own thoughts, and make choices that fit their personal lives. As a result, in daily communication and behavior, they place great importance on privacy, personal space, and the difference between individuals. They can be seen in many common habits, such as keep an appropriate distance during conversation, avoiding overly personal questions before becoming close, and respecting others' people's opinion even when they are disagree. This spirit helps create a living environment in which an individual is seen as an independent person who deserves respect to be heard. Along with personal freedom, American society also highly values equality, politeness in public life. In many everyday situations, it is easy to notice that Americans have the habit of standing in line, arriving on time, holding the door for the person behind them, saying thank you, apologizing, and using polite expression in communication. These small actions may seem simple, but they carry great meanings because they have built a society that is orderly, civilized, and respectful. In America, politeness does not always be formal or complicated. Instead, it is often expressed through very natural gestures in daily life. What is interesting is that when learning about American culture, we can see many things that feel both familiar and different compared with Asian countries. For example, Americans are often quite open in the way they greet others, more direct in communication, and place more importance on clarity in speech. In contrast, in many Asian countries, communication may be more reserved, subtle, and more strongly influenced by community value or society hierarchy. These differences do not mean that one culture is better than another. They simply show that each culture had its own way of expressing respect and building relationships between people. Learning about the custom and rules of behavior in life in America not only help us understand the United States more clearly, but also broaden our view of world culture. Through this, we can learn many positive lessons about modern civilized living, about respecting others in society. At the same time, this knowledge is also very useful for those who plan to work, study, or travel in America, because understanding basic social rules can make adapting to a new environment much easier and more natural. 2. Greeting culture. In any culture, greetings are an important part of communication because they are not only a way to begin a conversation, but also a way to express attitude, respect, and friendliness between people. In America, greeting culture has many distinctive features that clearly reflect an open, natural, practical, and equality-centered way of life. For many foreigners, especially those from Asian countries, the American ways of greeting can feel both familiar and different at the same time. Although it is not overly formal or complicated, the greetings, eye contact, smiles, handshakes, and light hugs you in daily life in America all carry meaning and have created a friendly and comfortable communication environment. One of the easiest things to notice in America is that people tend to greet one another quite often, even in situations that may seem very ordinary. In daily life, Americans may say hi, hello, hey, or how are you to co-workers, neighbors, store employee, classmates, or even someone they haven't met for the first time. This showing that greetings in American culture are not only a matter of formality but also a very common social habit. Saying hello helps begin an interaction in a light and pleasant way, creates a sense of approachability, and shows a basic level of respect for the other person. Because of this, if someone meets another person and says nothing at all, they may be seen as a little cold or unfriendly. Interestingly, in American cultural expressions such as how are you, how is it going, or what's up are often used more as greeting than a deep personal questions. Many people who are new to American English may interpret this literally and think they need to give a detailed answers about their feelings, health, or current problem. However, in most cases, these are simply polite and friendly way to start a conversation. Common responses are usually short, such as I am good, pretty good, doing well, or not bad, thanks. How about you? This is an interesting feature because it shows that in everyday life, everyday communication, Americans value keeping interaction positive, quick, and comfortable. A greeting does not need to be long, but it should still make both people feel that they have acknowledged each other politely. Along with words, smiling is also a very important part of greeting culture in America. When meeting someone, especially in workplace, school, stores, restaurants, or neighborhoods, Americans often accompany their greeting with a natural smile. In the context, a smile is not only a sign of happiness, but also a sign of goodwill. A light smile helps reduce the distance between strangers, make conversation easier to begin, and create a good first impression. For many Americans, smiling while greeting others is almost a natural reflex in social interaction. This reflects openness, friendliness, while also showing that positivity is highly valued in everyday behavior. Eye contact is important, another important feature of the American way of greeting. When communicating, Americans often look at the other person's eyes, especially in face-to-face meetings. Maintaining a reasonable level of eye contact is seen as a sign of confidence, sincerity, and respect. If someone constantly avoids eye contact while greeting or responding, in some situations, it may make others think that person lacks confidence, is not paying attention, or is not being genuine. However, this does not mean staring at someone continuously. It simply means maintaining natural eye contact to show engagement. Compared with some cultures where when looking directly into the eyes of an older person or someone of higher stature may be considered disrespectful, in America, eye contact is generally viewed as part of politeness and professionalism. Another very common form of greeting in America is the handshake. In work settings, business situations, schools, or first-time meetings, a handshake remains a familiar sign of politeness and respect. When shaking hands, Americans usually use moderate pressure, look the other person person in the eye and smiles. A handshake should not be too weak because that may seem like in confidence, but it should also not be too strong, and that may feel uncomfortable. Handshakes are usually brief but clear, expressing professionalism, seriousness, and goodwill. Especially in job interview, meetings, and partner introductions or formal situations, a handshake is still considered an important step in making a strong first impression. However, greeting culture in America is not limited to formal situations. In personal life, among friends, relatives, or people with close relationships, greetings are often much warmer and more relaxed. A light hug is very common, especially when meeting again after being apart from some time during family gatherings, on holidays, or simply when friends see each other. In American culture, a hug often carries the meaning of friendliness, warmth, and natural affection. For some people from culture with less physical contact, this may feel awkward at first, but in America, a light hug between friends or family members is considered normal and is often a sign that relationship is close and comfortable. Besides hugs, some groups of close friends or younger people may also use other casual forms of greeting, such as waving, high-fiving, nodding, or using very short greeting like "Hey," "Yo," or "What's up." These styles are usually natural, informal, and influenced by age, reason, social environment, and the closeness of the relationship. This shows that greeting culture in America is very flexible. There is not always a fixed ritual to follow. What matters more is choosing a style that fits the situation and the relationship between two people. In the workplace, greeting may be more polite and standard, while among friends, in schools, or in younger community, they may be much more relaxed and familiar. Another notable feature of American greeting culture is its sense of equality. In many situations, the way people greet each other across social classes, between older and younger people, or between managers and employees is not dramatically different in forms as it may be in many other countries. Americans often begin calling each other by first name fairly quickly, even in workplace or schools, as long as the context allows it. This does not mean disrespect. Rather, it reflects a spirit of equality and a desire to create a more comfortable atmosphere. A professor, an older co-worker, or a manager may introduce themselves by their first name and expect others to use it. For people from cultures that are used to title or very clear hierarchical forms of address, this can be surprising. But in America, using first name is often seen as a way to reduce distance and encourage open communication. Not in a familiar relationships, Americans also sometimes greet complete strangers in certain situations. For example, when walking in a neighborhood, strolling in a park, hiking, or being in a quiet with few people, you may notice someone smiling and say hi as they pass by. This small action, but it reflects friendliness and openness in everyday life. Of course, the degree to which people greet a stranger depends on reason, city, and situation. Of course, the degree to which people greet strangers depend on the reason, city, and situation. In busy places with a fast pace of life, such as city centers, people may greet strangers less often, but in neighborhoods, small towns, or community-oriented environment, greeting someone in passing is quite common. In service settings, greeting culture in America is also very clear. When entering a store, restaurant, hotel, or office, customers are often welcomed by employees with a smile and phrase like "Hi, how can I help you?" or "Welcome" or "Good morning." This is not only politeness but also a part of service standard. In return, customers usually respond politely as well. This two-way exchange of greeting makes the interaction more pleasant. It shows that in America, greeting is not reserved only for acquaintance, but also used as a tool to maintain a positive and civilized social environment. Even though greeting culture in America is generally open and friendly, there are still certain limits related to personal space and appropriateness. Not everyone likes to be hugged or taught, especially during a first meeting or in a formal setting. For this reason, Americans should often pay attention to the other person's signals. If someone seems reserved, they will usually do a handshake or does a verbal greeting instead of initiating closer physical contact. This shows that greetings in American culture are not only about being friendly, but about respecting other people's feelings and personal boundaries. In other words, a good greeting is not only about the gesture itself, but also about the sensitivity to choose what is appropriate for each person in each context. Another important point is that greeting culture in America is influenced by regional diversity and different cultural background. Because America is a multicultural and multi-ethnic country, styles of greeting can be varied across community. Some places are more warm and impressive, and while others are more reserved. Some groups prefer handshakes, some prefer light hugs, and in some environments, a greeting may be as simple as a polite note. However, despite these different forms, a shared value remains friendliness, clarity, and respect. This diversity makes American greeting culture more vibrant and interesting because it is not limited to one single pattern. For foreigners, understanding greeting culture in America is an important step toward adapting more smoothly to life there. A timely greeting, a light smile, an appropriate handshake, or a natural response to "How are you?" can quickly create a positive influence. On the other hand, without understanding this a person may unintentionally seem distant or awkward in communication. Therefore, learning of how Americans greet one another not only helps us communicate more effectively, but also gives us a clearer view of the deeper cultural value within American society, such as respect, positivity, equality, and openness. It can be said that greeting culture in America may seem simple in form, but it carries deep social meaning. From familiar expressions like "Hi, how are you?" to smiles, eye contact, handshakes, and light hug among close people, all of these reflect how Americans build relationships and connect with one another in daily life. It is a style of communication that values friendliness while still respecting personal boundaries, relaxed but not careless, warm yet still polite. That is exactly what makes greeting culture in America such a noteworthy topic when exploring custom and social etiquette in American society. 3. Respect for personal space. In daily life in America, one of the most important and easily recognizable rules of behavior is respect for personal space. This is not simply a social habit, but also a very distinctive part of American communication culture. For many people, especially those from cultures that value closeness, community spirit, and direct involvement in one another's lives, the American idea of personal space may feel quite different. However, when we look deeper, we can see that respecting privacy and personal boundaries is not a sign of coldness or distance. Instead, it is a way Americans show politeness, respect for the individual, and recognition for each person's freedom within society. Personal space in this context can be understood in both physical and emotional sense. Physically, Americans usually keep a certain distance when talking to others, especially with people they are not very close to. In ordinary conversation, they generally do not stand too close, put an arm around someone, talk frequently, or engage in much physical contact unless it is truly appropriate. This distance helps each person feel comfortable, free from pressure, and safe in the interaction. If someone unintentionally stands too close, many Americans may instinctively step back a little to restore a natural distance. That is very common in daily life, from workplace and school to supermarket, restaurants, and social gatherings. Maintaining an appropriate physical distance reflects an important cultural mindset in America, which is that every person has a personal zone that deserves respect. Not everyone feels comfortable when someone comes too close, especially in the relationship is not yet close enough. Therefore, keeping a respectful distance does not mean being unfriendly. On the contrary, it shows that a person understands the other person's boundaries and does not want to make them uncomfortable. In the eyes of many Americans, politeness is not shown only through gentle words, but also through knowing how to keep the right amount of distance. That is especially interesting because in many other cultures, standing close may be seen as a sign of warmth or care. But in America, if it is not suitable to the context, it may instead create a feeling of intrusion. Besides physical distance, Americans also place a high value on personal space and in an emotion and physiological sense. Especially when it comes to privacy in personal life. In communication, they usually do not like being asked overly personal questions unless the relationship is already fairly close. Questions such as how old someone is, how much money they earn, whether they are married, when they plan to have children, what religion they follow, or what their political opinions are can be considered sensitive topics. If asked too early or too directly, Americans tend to believe that each person has the right to keep personal information private and to share it only when they feel truly comfortable. For this reason, asking too many personal questions at the beginning of the relationship may make the other person feel examined or disrespected. This does not mean that Americans do not care about each other. It simply shows that their way of showing interest is somewhat different. Instead of immediately digging into private matters, they often begin with general topics such as the weather, work, hobbies, weekend plans, movies, sport, or other light social subjects. Over time, as the relationship becomes closer, they may gradually share more about their personal life. This approach reflects caution and respect for the other person's feeling. In American society, caring about someone does not mean knowing them about everything about them. It means knowing when it is appropriate to ask, how far to go, and when to stop. That is a very characteristic feature of modern social ethics, where personal boundaries are seen as something important to protect. In family life and everyday living arrangements, respect for personal space is also very clearly expressed. For example, knocking before entering someone else's room is considered a basic rule of politeness. Whether it is a child room, a sibling room, or a roommate room, people generally knock and wait for a response before entering. These actions show recognition that each person has a space of their own, even inside a shared home. Similarly, opening someone's drawer, reading their mail, checking the phone, or using their personal belongings without permission is usually considered rude. In America, privacy is not only respect in public life, but it is also taken seriously within the family. Another familiar action that shows respect for personal space is asking permission before using someone else's belonging. Whether it is something small like a pen, a jacket, a book, or a phone charger, Americans usually make a habit of asking first. It is not necessarily because they are overly strict about ownership, but because they value the basic principle that if something belongs to someone, that person has the right to decide how it is used. Asking permission is both a sign of politeness and a sign of respect for another person's personal boundaries. In many cases, even if someone is almost certain the answer will be yes, they still ask first as a matter of proper behavior. This creates transparency, comfort, and fewer misunderstandings in daily relationships. Personal space is also expressed through the way Americans behave in public place. When standing in line, they usually keep a certain distance from the person in front of them rather than pressing too closely. On buses, trains, or in elevators, they also try not to disturb the people around them with loud noise, excessive stirring, or overly personal conversations spoken too loudly. In places such as library, waiting room, coffee shop, or park, people are often very aware of not interfering with the quiet or physical comfort of others. Even in crowded environments, the idea of being polite and respecting the right of others to feel comfortable remains highly valued. This shows that personal space is not only an individual matter, but also part of a broader sense of community awareness in society. In workplace and educational settings, respecting personal space becomes even more important. Americans generally value professionalism, and part of being professional means understanding the boundaries between work and private life. Co-workers may be friendly and open, but that does not mean they are willing to share every personal details. In classrooms, students may communicate naturally with teachers, but there are still certainly myths that expect to be respected. In office, looking at someone else's computer screen without permission, listening in on private calls, opening personal items, or asking too deeply about family matters cannot be seen as inappropriate. These rules have created work and study environments where people feel respect, safe, and comfortable. As an interesting point is that respect for personal space in America is closely tied to the value of individual freedom, which is a very important part of American society. Americans believe that each person has the right to make decisions about their own life through their own relationships, protect their privacy, and set boundaries for themselves. When someone respects another person's personal space, it also means they are acknowledging that person's freedom and dignity. That is why, even though it may outwardly seem like keeping distance, it is actually a sign of deep respect and civility. It helps people live together more comfortably, reduce conflict, and create a balance between closeness and freedom in social relationships. Of course, the level of importance placed on personal space in America can vary depending on the situation, reason, family, and cultural background of each person. Some communities are more open, more affectionate, and more accustomed to expressing closeness through physical contact. Even so, in general, The principle of respecting distance, privacy, and personal boundary remains a common standard in American life. For foreigners, understanding this is very important because it helps avoid situations in which they may unintentionally make others uncomfortable. And it is also help adapt more naturally to a new environment. Simply paying attention to small actions such as knocking before entering a room, asking before using someone's belonging, avoiding overly personal questions, and keeping an appropriate distance while speaking can already show respect in a way that matches American cultural value. It can be said that respect for personal space is one of the most representative features of custom and social ethics in America. It is not just a surface level communication rule, but something that clearly reflects how Americans view individuals and relationships in society. They highly value privacy, freedom, and each person's sense of comfort while building politeness and sensitivity in both action and speech. From physical distance in a conversation to the way questions are asked, to knocking on doors, asking permission to use belongings, and behaving respectfully in public. All of these show that personal space is a deeply rooted value in American life. Learning about this not only helps us better understand American culture, but also offer valuable lessons about how to behave in a civilized, thoughtful, and respectful way in modern society. 4. The culture of queuing and punctuality. In daily life in America, the culture of queuing and being punctual are two very clear expressions of respect for others, community awareness, and a disciplined way of life. This rule of behavior may seem simple, but they play an important role in maintaining order, fairness, and efficiency in society. For Americans, standing properly in line or arriving on time for an appointment is not just a habitual action, but also a way of showing politeness, responsibility, and seriousness toward the people around them. When learning about American culture, it becomes clear that small actions such as not pushing in public display or not arriving late to meetings strongly reflect how this society operates with respect for time and for the rights of each individual. First of all, queuing culture is one of the most common and easily recognizable habits in life in America. At supermarkets, banks, and restaurants, checkout counters, bus stations, airports, movie theaters, and public service offices, people usually line up and wait their turn voluntarily. There is often little need for reminders because it is almost an automatic social behavior. Those who arrive first are served first, and those who come later wait for their turn. This rule is simple, but it clearly reflects the spirit of fairness. It shows that everyone has the same right to accept a service, and that no one should place themselves ahead of others simply because they are in a hurry or want to save time for themselves. In the eye of Americans, pushing, cutting in line, or trying to move ahead before one's turn is considered rude and disrespectful. Such actions do not only annoy the people who have been waiting, but also disrupt the general order. When someone ignores the line, it means that the person is putting personal interest above the right of others. For that reason, if someone cuts in line, people nearby may speak up or show clear dissatisfaction. This demonstrates that queuing is not merely a technical rule to avoid confusion, but also a social norm connected to politeness and civic awareness in American society. What is especially notable is that queuing culture in America is not limited to places where there is a clearly marked waiting area, such as checkout counters or bus stops. It also appears in many ordinary situations. In daily life, for example, when waiting to buy coffee, waiting for an elevator, waiting to board a bus, waiting to use a public restroom, or waiting to enter an event, people still usually make an effort to establish and respect the order of arrival. Even in situations where there are no lines marked on the ground or no barriers, people try to maintain a clear sense of sequence. This shows that queuing has become part of everyday life and respect a habit of respecting common rules as well as the presence of others in public space. Another interesting aspect of queuing culture is that it is closely connected to respect for personal space. While waiting in line, Americans usually do not stand too close to the person in front of them, but instead keep a certain distance. That does not create a sense of comfort, but also reflect public politeness. Standing too close may make someone feel pressure or uncomfortable, especially in crowded places. Therefore, even when queuing, orders do not simply mean to who is first and who is next, but also include how each person maintains space and behaves politely toward those around them. This helps public space in America function in a more orderly, calm, and less chaotic way. Along with queuing culture, punctuality is also a very noticeable feature of life in America. Americans often viewed as an important resort, so they place great value on arriving on time for most activity in life. Whether meeting friends, attending a meeting, going to school, going to work, showing up for an interview, or participating in an event, arriving on time is considered a sign of respect for others. If a person arrives on time, it shows that they value the other person's time, have a sense of responsibility, and know how to honor commitments. On the other hand, arriving late without notice is often seen as unprofessional, impolite, or careless. In the workplace, punctuality carries special importance. Meeting usually begins at scheduled time. Employees are expected to arrive promptly, and completing tasks by deadlines is highly valued standard. If someone is often late, they may be viewed as disorganized, unreliable, or not serious about their work. Similarly, in educational settings, students are expected to come to class on time, submit assignments by due date, and follow academic schedules. This reflects a clear idea in American society. Respecting time is not only about managing one's own responsibility well, but also about respecting the rhythm and structure of the group as a whole. In personal relationships, punctuality is also highly valued. When meeting someone for dinner, coffee, a movie, or a social gathering, Americans usually try to arrive on time or only a few minutes late in an unavoidable case. If they know they will be late, they often send a message or call in advance. This act of informing the other person is very important because it shows awareness that one's delay may affect another person's plans. Even in informal meetings, respecting each other's time is still appreciated. This shows that punctuality is not a personal rule but also part of everyday politeness. An interesting point is that in American culture, being on time may sometimes also mean arriving a little early for important occasions. For example, when attending a job interview, an important meeting, going to the airport, or arriving for a medical appointment, people are often advised to come a few minutes or even several minutes early in order to prepare. Arriving early helps avoid problems caused by traffic, administrative procedure, or unexpected delay. At the same time, it creates a positive impression of professionalism and thoughtfulness. In many cases, arriving too late is clearly inappropriate, but arriving too early for certain personal gathering may also may be inconvenient. For this reason, Americans often pay attention not only to being on time, but also to being appropriate in timing, depending on the situation. Both queuing culture and punctuality in America reflect a deeper value, which is respect for others and for social order. When persons stand in line and patiently wait for their turn, they are recognizing that everyone had equal rights. When a person arrives on time, they are showing that another person's time is as important as their own. These two habits may seem small, but they contribute to trust, efficiency, and stability in society. They help activity run more smoothly, reduce unnecessary conflict, and create a more civilized environment. For foreigners, becoming familiar with the culture of queuing and punctuality in America is very important. In many cases, newcomers may not yet be used to the strict expectation of order in public place and may not realize that being only a few minutes late can sometimes be seen as disrespectful. However, once they understand the meaning behind this rule, adapting becomes much easier. Lining up properly, not pushing ahead, being aware of time, planning in advance, and notifying others if delay or behavior that help a person integrate more smoothly into life in America. At the same time, these are also very positive habits that any modern society can learn from. It can be said that the culture of queuing and punctuality are two very representative features of custom and social ethics in America. They are not merely formal rules but clear reflections of discipline, fairness, and mutual respect in American society. From waiting in orderly way at supermarket, presentations, or restaurants to arriving on time for study, work, and personal appointments, all of these habits show that Americans place great importance on responsible behavior within the community. Learning about these customs help us better understand how American society functions, while also offering valuable lessons about civility, awareness, and respect for others in modern life. 5 Everyday Rules of Social Etiquette. In daily life in America, rules of social etiquette are often expressed through very small actions, yet they carry great importance in building a polite, civilized, and respectful environment. Unlike legal regulations or formal rules in professional settings, everyday communication rules are mainly shaped by social habits, individual awareness, and the way people treat one another in very ordinary situations. For this reason, when we observe how Americans communicate in daily life, we can clearly see some of the core values of the culture, such as politeness, respect for the individual, directness combined with courtesy, and the desire to maintain a positive atmosphere in the community. One of the most noticeable features of everyday communication in America is the frequent use of words such as please, thank you, and sorry. These are very familiar, simple expressions that appear in countless situations, from family life, school, and the workplace to supermarkets, restaurants, and public space. Although these words are short, they clearly reflect politeness in daily life. When asking someone for help, adding the word please so that the speaker is not giving an order but expressing respect. When receiving help, no matter how small, saying thank you acknowledges the kindness of the other person. As for sorry, it is not only used for serious mistake, but also spoken naturally in small situations, such as accidentally blocking someone's way or causing a minor inconvenience. This shows that in communication in America, politeness does not necessarily come from grand action, but it is spread consistently through short yet thoughtful words. The frequent use of such polite expression also reflect a distinctive feature of American culture, which is the recognition of the other person's value and present. When saying please, a person is indirectly recognizing that the other person has the choice to have or not. When saying thank you, they show that they do not take another person's support for granted. When saying sorry, they acknowledge that their action may have affected someone else. From this perspective, these words may seem very simple, are actually an important part of the way Americans view social relationships based on mutual respect. They often soften communication, reduce tension, and create a sense of comfort even in very brief interaction. In addition to words, Americans also pay close attention to small actions that express politeness in shared space. A very common example is the habit of holding the door for the person behind. When entering a building, store, school, or restaurant, if they notice someone walking right behind them, many Americans will naturally hold the door open for a few seconds so the other person can enter more easily. This is a small but very familiar gesture, and it reflects a concern for the convenience of others. The person receiving the gesture will usually respond with thank you or a light smile. This short interaction helps create a more friendly and pleasant environment. Holding the door is not an obligation, but it is seen as a clear sign of everyday courtesy. In addition, Americans also tend to be mindful of maintaining order and appropriate volume in public places. In spaces such as libraries, buses, trains, coffee shops, waiting rooms, supermarkets, or elevators, speaking too loudly or create too much noise is often seen as inconsiderate, even when there is no written rule. Many people still naturally adjust their voice to avoid disturbing others. That is an expression of respect for shared space, and is also closely connected to the idea of respecting personal space. When someone lowers their voice in public, it is not only show politeness, but also demonstrates awareness that people around them may need quiet, comfort, or the ability to focus on their own activities. Another very important aspect of everyday etiquette in America is respect for other people's personal opinions. In communication, Americans are often encouraged to express their thoughts, share personal views, and take part in open discussions. However, what is equally important is that they are also expected to accept that other people may hold different opinions. Even when they disagree, many people still try to respond calmly, politely, and with reasoning rather than with personal attacks. Expressions such as I see your point, that is interesting, I understand what you mean, or I don't agree, but I respect your opinion, are very common in conversation. This shows that in American culture, communication is not just about saying what one thinks, but also about listening and maintaining respect during agreement. Respect for personal opinions is especially clear in educational and professional settings. In classroom, students are often encouraged to ask questions, express opinions, and even debate with teachers about certain topics. In the workplace, employees may also give suggestions, make proposals, or challenge ideas more directly in many other cultures. However, this openness is always accompanied by an important expectation. People must remain polite and respectful in the way they express them. They may depict ideas, but they should not insult individuals. The balance between directness and courtesy is one of the distinctive features of everyday communication in America. Beyond these points, everyday etiquette in America is also reflect the ability to apologize at the right time and to admit mistake without hesitation. In many situations, if someone accidentally bumps into another person, arrives at a few minutes late, misunderstands someone, or causes a small inconvenience, they will often quickly say sorry. This does not necessarily mean they have made a major mistake, but it is often a way to preserve harmony in communication. A timely apology can ease an awkward moment and show that the speaker is aware of the other person feeling. That is a small but very important detail because it helps daily relationship remain smooth and prevent unnecessary tension. Politeness in communication in America is also closely linked to practicality and clarity. Americans often tend to speak directly, but they still try to choose words carefully so as not to make others feel insulted. For example, when declining an invitation, they may clearly say that they cannot attend but still include appreciation or thanks. When giving feedback, they often try to be specific and focus on the issue rather than using emotional criticism. This style of communication helps make relationship more transparent and reduce misunderstanding. It also shows that in American society, being polite does not mean being overly direct, but rather knowing how to say what needs to be said in the most respectful way possible. In everyday life, rules of etiquette such as thank you, apologizing, holding the door, speaking softly in public, or respecting personal opinions may seem very ordinary, but they are exactly what have built the quality of social life. A civilized community is not created only by major law or modern infrastructure, but also by the way people treat one another in small interaction. In America, people understand that a polite word or a thoughtful gesture or a willingness to listen can make the living environment much more pleasant. It's through this small detail that everyday etiquette becomes an important part of social identity. For foreigners, understanding and adapting to everyday communication rules in America can make the process of integration much smoother. Simply paying attention to basic things such as using please, thank you, and sorry appropriately, not speaking too loudly in public, holding the door for others, and respecting others' viewpoints can already create a very positive impression. These actions do not require anything complicated, but they show thoughtfulness, awareness, and the ability to adapt to a new cultural environment. At the same time, these are also valuable lessons that can be applied in many different societies to build a more polite and human ways of life. It can be said that everyday rules of social etiquette in America are a harmonious combination of polite language, small thoughtful action, and an attitude of respect for others in all situations. From using words such as please, thank yous, and sorries to holding the door for the person behind, speaking softly in public, and listening to different opinions, all of these reflect the spirit of civility and courtesy that is clearly visible in American society. These are not just simply a symbol of communication habits, but foundations that help people live together in a more positive, comfortable, and respectful way. Learning about this rule helps us better understand American culture while also inspiring useful reflection on how to behave in modern life. Tipping culture. One of the most interesting and distinctive features of life in America is tipping culture. For many people from other countries, especially from places where tipping is not very common or is considered entirely optional, leaving a tip in many situations in the United States can feel unfamiliar at first. However, in American society, a tip is not simply a small extra amount of money added after using a service. It is a familiar part of daily life, closely connected to how people evaluate service quality, express appreciation for workers' efforts, and support the functioning of many service industries. For this reason, when learning about American culture, tipping is always a very noteworthy topic because it clearly reflects the relationship between customer, workers, and social norms in society. In everyday life in America, tipping appears in many different service settings. The most common include restaurants, cafes with table service, taxis, hotels, hair salons, nail salons, delivery service, and other personal care service. After using a service, customers often leave an additional amount beyond the main bill to thank and acknowledge the staff member who served them. That is seen as a very common action, and in many cases, it has become almost a social standard. What is especially important is that in the United States, tipping is not merely symbolic. Sometimes it has a very practical meaning for the worker's income. Because of that, tipping culture in America carries deeper significance than simply adding a little extra money, the way it may be understood in some other places. One reason tipping is so important in America is that in some service jobs, worker basic wage may not be very high, and tips become a significant part of their overall income. That is especially true for the restaurant servers, whose earnings can be strongly affected by the quality of service they provide, their friendliness, their speed, and their professionalism. For this reason, tipping in American society is not only an act of courtesy from the customer, but also part of how the service industry functions. Customers understand that the money they leave behind may have recognized the real effort of the person serving them, while workers also see tips as motivation to remain attentive, professional, and welcoming in their work. In restaurants in America, leaving a tip after a meal is generally expected. While dining at a place with table service, customers usually evaluate not only the food but also the overall experience, including the way they are welcomed, the friendliness of the staff, the speed of service, the willingness to help when needed, and the way requests were handled. In that context, tipping becomes a way for customers to respond to the quality of service. If the server is attentive, polite, and professional, customers usually feel that leaving a tip is entirely appropriate. On the other hand, if the experience is poor, the amount of the tip may be reduced, or in some special case, a customer may choose not to tip at all. This shows that in American culture, tipping is not only a matter of politeness, but also a subtle form of communication between the customer and the service provider. Beyond restaurants, tipping is also very common in transportation, personal care service. When taking a taxi or using a car service, many Americans have the habit of leaving a tip for the driver, especially if the trip is safe, the driver is friendly, helps with luggage, or provides a comfortable experience. Similarly, at hair salons, nail salons, spas, or other personal care businesses, customers often tip as a way of thanking the person who directly served them. In these industries, attention to details, service attitude, and the ability to make the customer feel satisfied are highly valued, and tipping becomes a fairly direct way of showing appreciation. This demonstrates that tipping culture in America is not limited to food service, but had become a familiar part of many areas of daily life. Interestingly, tipping in America does not only express satisfaction, it also reflects the way people view service labor in modern society. Jobs such as serving tables, driving, delivering goods, doing hair, or provide customer care can sometimes be underestimated when judged only from the outside. However, tipping culture partly reminds people that all of these jobs require effort, skill, patience, and professional service attitudes. When customers leave a tip, they are not only adding money, but also showing appreciation for the work that another person had done for them. In this sense, tipping carries a positive social meaning. It helps create a connection between the person serving and the person being served, based on recognition and mutual respect. Of course, for foreigners or those who are new to America, tipping culture can sometimes feel confused at first. Many people may not know when to tip, how much to tip, or may feel unfamiliar with the idea of having to add something beyond the list price. However, after living there and gain experience, most people come to understand that tipping in America is not just a social rule, but also part of their service experience. Understanding this helps people avoid awkward situations and adapt more smoothly to life there. It also shows that in American culture, politeness does not stop at words or attitudes, but is also expressed through concrete action during an interaction with others. At the same time, tipping culture in the United States is also a topic with different perspectives. Some people believe it is a positive part of service culture because it encourages dedication and allows customers to directly recognize the effort of workers. Others feel that tipping can sometimes create pressure for both customers and workers, especially when it becomes almost mandatory in certain situations. No matter how it is viewed, it cannot be denied that tipping has become an important part of everyday social life in America. Understanding is not only help us better understand customer habits and service culture in the United States, but also help us see more clearly how American society organizes the relationship between work, income, and recognition in everyday life. It can be said that tipping culture is a very unique and distinctive feature of life in America. It reflects not only the service style of American society, but also the way people value labor and express courtesy toward those who work in service industry. From restaurant and taxis to personal care service, leaving a tip has become familiar action that is both practical and socially meaningful. Learning about tipping culture gives us a clearer picture of daily life in America and also help us prepare better if we ever study, work, or travel there. Conclusion: in general, the custom and rules of behavior in life in America show that it is a society that highly values politeness, respect for the individual, and civility in public space. From friendly greetings, the habit of standing in line, punctuality, and keeping an appropriate distance in communication, to saying thank you, apologizing, and showing respect for others people's opinion. All of these clearly reflect important values in American daily life, even though these things may sometimes appear only in very small action. They are exactly what have created a living environment that is more orderly, positive, and comfortable for everyone. Learning about this cultural feature not only helps us understanding the United States better, but also broaden our perspective on how people build a modern and civilized society. Through this, we can realize that respect is not shown only through big action, but also through everyday words, gesture, and behavior. These are also very useful lessons for everyone preparing to work, study, or travel in America, because understanding basic social rules make adapting to a new environment much more natural and easier. It can be said that social etiquette in America is a combination of individual freedom, equality, and community awareness. This value create a unique character of American society and make learning about its culture both interesting, practical, and worthwhile.